Welcome to AD Horror Show. Mark had always loved rainy nights, but this one was different. As he sat alone in his dimly lit living room, he heard a haunting melody drifting in through the open window. The notes were mournful, chilling, and they seemed to be calling to him. Unable to resist, Mark followed the melody to his backyard, where he found an old, weathered piano standing in the pouring rain. It played by itself, its keys moving as if touched by invisible fingers. Mark's heart raced as he realized the tune was a requiem for the forgotten. With each note, the rain fell harder, and the melody grew more sorrowful. Mark knew he was not alone. The ghostly pianist was there to remind him of a long-buried tragedy, one that he could not escape. As Mark stood in the rain-soaked backyard, the haunting melody continued to pour from the piano. The notes hung heavy in the air, laden with sorrow and an unfathomable sense of loss. The raindrops fell harder, mixing with Mark's own tears as he watched the keys depress and release, seemingly of their own accord. He couldn't resist the pull of the music, and he approached the piano cautiously, his breath visible in the chilly night air. There, standing in the downpour, he saw a flicker of movement, an indistinct figure, barely discernible through the rain and darkness, seated at the piano bench. It was the ghostly pianist, dressed in tattered garments of another era. Mark knew he couldn't explain this supernatural occurrence, but he felt compelled to communicate with the spirit. In a quivering voice, he asked, "Who are you? Why are you playing this mournful tune?" The ghostly figure turned to him, its eyes hollow and filled with an ancient sadness. It spoke in a voice that seemed to come from the depths of eternity. "I am Emily, and this is my requiem. I died in this very house, forgotten by all, and my soul could not rest until someone heard my song." Mark's heart ached as he listened to Emily's tale. She had been a gifted pianist in life, but a tragic accident had robbed her of the chance to share her music with the world. She had died alone, her talent wasted and her dreams unfulfilled. Determined to help Emily find peace, Mark offered his hand to her, even though his rational mind struggled to comprehend the impossible. "Emily, I will listen to your requiem. I will be the one to remember you." With that, Mark sat beside Emily at the rain-soaked piano, his trembling fingers joining hers on the keys. Together, they played the mournful melody, the rain intensifying around them as if the heavens themselves wept for Emily's unfulfilled life. As the final notes faded into the night, Emily's form became more transparent, and her eyes filled with gratitude. With a gentle smile, she whispered, "Thank you, Mark," and then, like a wisp of smoke, she vanished. The rain began to subside, leaving Mark standing alone in his backyard, drenched but with a profound sense of closure. He had helped Emily find peace, and as he returned to his living room, he knew that he would never hear the haunting melody again. The memory of Emily's requiem would stay with him forever, a bittersweet reminder of a rainy night when the boundaries between the living and the dead had momentarily blurred. In the days that followed, Mark couldn't forget the encounter with Emily and the haunting melody of her requiem. He became obsessed with uncovering the truth behind her tragic story. He scoured old newspapers, visited the local historical society, and even consulted with paranormal experts in an attempt to find answers. As he delved deeper into Emily's past, he discovered that she had indeed lived in his very house over a century ago. She had been a prodigious pianist, with dreams of performing on grand stages across the world. But her dreams were shattered when a terrible fire had consumed the house, taking her life and her music with it. Mark felt an overwhelming sense of responsibility to honor Emily's memory. He decided to restore the old piano to its former glory, spending hours meticulously repairing the weathered instrument. He polished the keys until they gleamed, and when he played, The melodies that filled the room were no longer mournful requiems but the beautiful compositions Emily had once longed to share. The sound of the rejuvenated piano filled the house, bringing a warmth and vitality that had long been absent. Mark felt Emily's presence as he played, knowing that she was finally getting the chance to share her music with the world, even if it was a century too late. Word of Mark's incredible discovery and the hauntingly beautiful music that echoed through the house spread throughout the town. People began to visit, drawn by the ethereal melodies that transcended time and space. Emily's music touched the hearts of everyone who heard it, and she was no longer forgotten. Lucas had always felt a connection to the antique mirror that hung in his hallway. On this stormy night, the reflection staring back at him seemed different, distorted, with hollow eyes that seemed to beckon him closer. Unable to resist, Lucas approached the mirror, his heart pounding. As he touched the glass, the reflection reached out, grabbing his wrist with icy fingers. A cold, wet sensation enveloped him as he was pulled into the mirror. Inside, Lucas found himself in a shadowy world, surrounded by countless reflections of himself, all distorted and twisted. Each one whispered tales of his darkest fears and regrets. The rain outside pounded on the mirror, trapping him in this nightmarish reflection of his own soul. These chilling horror stories should send shivers down your spine as they explore the eerie combination of being alone at home on a rainy night, suspense, and supernatural elements. Inside the nightmarish reflection world, Lucas felt a sense of disorientation and terror like he had never known. The twisted reflections of himself closed in on him, their hollow eyes burning with malevolence. Each one hissed and whispered stories of his deepest fears, insecurities, and the sins he had buried deep within his soul. Lucas tried to fight the overwhelming darkness, to break free from the icy grip of his reflections, but it seemed impossible. The rain outside continued to pummel the mirror, its relentless drumming echoing through the shadowy realm, a constant reminder of the storm that had brought him here. As the reflections continued to torment him, Lucas realized that he was reliving moments from his past that he had long tried to forget. Regrets from lost opportunities, guilt over past mistakes, and paralyzing fears of the future all surged to the surface. The reflections seemed to feed on his anguish, growing stronger with each admission of weakness. But amidst the torment, Lucas began to notice something peculiar. Some of the reflections showed glimpses of kindness, empathy, and moments of courage he had forgotten. They were like faint beacons of hope in the sea of despair. Lucas realized that he had to embrace his own flaws and vulnerabilities, to accept that they were part of who he was. With renewed determination, he confronted the darkest aspects of his soul head-on, refusing to be defined by them any longer. As he did, the twisted reflections of himself began to lose their power. They flickered and waned, their once menacing voices growing weaker. As dawn approached, Lucas summoned all his strength and broke free from the icy grip of the mirror's distorted reflections. Gasping for breath, he stumbled back into his hallway, where the antique mirror had returned to its normal appearance. The storm outside had subsided, and he was once again in his own world. Lucas knew that the nightmarish reflection had been a manifestation of his own inner demons, and he had faced them head-on. As he looked into the mirror one last time, he saw his own reflection, stronger and more resilient than before. With a newfound sense of self-acceptance, Lucas left the mirror behind, no longer haunted by the shadows of his own mind. The chilling experience of that rainy night had forced him to confront his darkest fears and regrets, and he emerged from it with a profound understanding of the power of self-acceptance and the importance of embracing one's flaws as a part of their journey toward personal growth and healing. As Lucas stood before the antique mirror, he marveled at the transformative power of the nightmarish reflection world he had just escaped. The distorted, malevolent reflections had represented the darkest corners of his soul, but through his resilience and acceptance of his own vulnerabilities, he had emerged stronger and wiser. The storm outside had completely subsided, and the morning sun bathed the hallway in warm, comforting light. Lucas knew that he could no longer view the mirror with fear and apprehension. It was a mirror that had forced him to confront his own demons, and in doing so, he had found a newfound sense of self-acceptance and strength. Lucas decided to keep the antique mirror in its place in the hallway, no longer feeling the need to avoid or hide from it. He saw it as a symbol of his personal growth and a reminder that confronting one's fears and regrets could lead to inner transformation. In the weeks that followed, Lucas began to notice subtle changes in his life. He felt a newfound confidence and resilience in the face of adversity. He tackled challenges with a determination he had never known before, unburdened by the weight of past regrets and fears that had once held him back. As time passed, Lucas's relationships with others also improved. His newfound self-acceptance and empathy allowed him to connect with people on a deeper level. He reached out to friends and family, mending old wounds and strengthening bonds that had been strained. Samantha had always enjoyed the peaceful solitude of her cabin in the woods. But as the rain poured down outside, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. She heard faint footsteps and whispers in the shadows, but every time she turned to investigate, there was nothing there. As the hours passed, the sense of dread intensified. The rain outside became a torrential downpour, and the whispers grew louder. Samantha finally caught a glimpse of a shadowy figure darting through the hallway, but when she pursued, it vanished into thin air. Terrified, Samantha locked herself in her room, hoping for morning to come quickly. But as the rain beat relentlessly against the windows, she realized she was not alone. Something unseen lurked in her cabin, waiting to reveal its sinister purpose. Samantha huddled in her room, the rain pelting the windows like a relentless onslaught. Her heart pounded in her chest as she clutched her phone, ready to dial for help, but the lack of signal in the remote woods left her feeling utterly isolated. The whispering voices grew more insistent, their words now clear and chilling. They spoke of ancient curses and long-forgotten sins. Samantha's mind swirled with fear as she realized that these were not the voices of the living but the tormented echoes of the dead. The hours dragged on, and Samantha could feel the cabin's atmosphere growing increasingly oppressive. Shadows danced menacingly on the walls, and her breath came out in ragged gasps. She was trapped in a nightmarish tableau of dread, and there was no escape. Just as hope seemed to slip away entirely, the rain outside took on an eerie, blood-red hue. Samantha's room was bathed in crimson light, casting sinister silhouettes across the walls. The whispers reached a crescendo, their voices a cacophonous chorus of despair. And then, the rain-soaked figure from the hallway appeared at her door. It was a ghostly figure, with hollow eyes that seemed to pierce Samantha's very soul. It moved closer, its footsteps leaving no trace on the wooden floor. With trembling hands, Samantha held up a small, ornate locket that had belonged to her grandmother. The locket was said to have protective properties, passed down through generations. She hoped that it would shield her from whatever malevolent force had invaded her sanctuary. The ghostly figure hesitated, its form wavering, as if struggling against an unseen force. Samantha clutched the locket tighter, reciting a prayer her grandmother had taught her. The room seemed to crackle with energy, and the ghostly intruder let out an agonized scream before dissolving into a dark mist that was sucked out through the window. The rain returned to its normal, soothing rhythm, and the cabin's atmosphere lightened. Samantha's heart still raced, but she knew she had banished the malevolent spirit. Her grandmother's locket had saved her. As the first rays of dawn broke through the trees, Samantha ventured cautiously out of her room, her locket still clutched in her hand. The cabin was empty, the shadows had retreated, and the whispers had faded into the morning light. Samantha knew that she would never forget that night, the night she had faced the sinister presence in her cabin in the woods. With the locket as a symbol of protection, she vowed to remain vigilant, for in the remote solitude of the forest, there were secrets that could never be fully understood, and forces that must always be reckoned with. Samantha's heart continued to race, even as the morning light filtered through the cabin's windows. The eerie red hue of the rain had dissipated, leaving behind the soft, gentle patter of a typical rainstorm. She clung to her grandmother's locket, finding comfort in its presence, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something malevolent still lingered in the woods around her. With cautious steps, she ventured outside to inspect the surroundings. The forest appeared as serene as ever, its trees glistening with raindrops, but Samantha knew that appearances could be deceiving. The rain-soaked figure had left a haunting impression, and the memories of the tormented voices continued to haunt her. Determined to uncover the truth, Samantha began to research the history of her remote cabin. She visited the nearby town and spoke with the locals, hoping to uncover any dark secrets or legends that might explain the sinister events of that night. It was during these investigations that she stumbled upon an old, tattered journal hidden away in the town's archives. The journal belonged to a hermit who had once lived in the woods, and its entries spoke of dark rituals and a curse that had plagued the land for generations. As Samantha delved deeper into the journal's contents, she realized that the ghostly presence she had encountered was tied to an ancient curse, one that demanded retribution for long-forgotten sins committed by those who had settled in the woods. Amelia had always found solace in the sound of raindrops tapping on her windowpane. But tonight, as she sat alone in her old, creaky house, the rain took on a sinister tone. The wind howled through the trees, and the rain seemed to whisper secrets as it fell. Amelia tried to ignore it, focusing on her book, but the whispers grew louder and more insistent. She strained to make out the words, and as she did, she felt a cold hand brush against her shoulder. She screamed, but no one was there. The whispers grew into a cacophony of voices, and Amelia realized they were coming from within the walls of her own home. She was not alone, the spirits of the past were making themselves known. And as the rain intensified, so did their terror. Amelia's heart raced as the voices within her home swirled around her, their words unintelligible but filled with anguish. The room grew colder, and her breath formed misty clouds in the air. Shadows danced on the walls, and the rain outside pounded against the window as if trying to break in. Desperation washed over Amelia, and she knew she had to confront whatever malevolent force had invaded her sanctuary. Clutching a trembling hand to her chest, she ventured deeper into the dark, creaking corridors of her old house. The voices led her to a hidden door she had never noticed before. The wood was ancient, its surface etched with strange symbols. With trembling fingers, she pushed the door open and stepped into a hidden chamber, lit only by flickering candles. In the center of the room, a circle of old, yellowed photographs lay scattered on the floor. As Amelia approached, she recognized faces from her family's past, long-gone relatives she had never met. Their eyes in the photographs were filled with sorrow, and she could now understand the whispers that had haunted her. Amelia realized these spirits were trapped here, bound to the memories captured in those photographs. She felt their anger and despair, and she knew she had to help them find peace. With trembling hands, she lit a bundle of sage she found on a dusty shelf and began to cleanse the room, reciting an incantation passed down through generations. The flames flickered and danced, and the room filled with an otherworldly glow. Slowly, the spirits began to materialize, their figures taking shape before her eyes. They gazed at her with gratitude, and their whispers turned into words of thanks. Amelia's heart ached as she watched them ascend, one by one, into the afterlife, finally finding the peace they had long sought. As the last spirit faded away, the rain outside began to subside, and the once sinister whispers ceased. Amelia knew her old house was finally at peace, and the rain now sounded like a gentle lullaby. She had not only faced her fear but helped the restless spirits find solace in the storm. With a sense of closure, she returned to her book, knowing that the sinister rain had given way to a more comforting one, and her home was truly her own once more. Amelia's sense of relief was short-lived as she closed the door to the hidden chamber. She returned to her book, trying to push aside the memory of the chilling encounter with the trapped spirits. But something felt off, as if the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for something else to happen. As the minutes passed, Amelia couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. She glanced around the room, her eyes darting from one shadowy corner to another. The rain outside had stopped, and an eerie silence hung in the air. Just as she began to convince herself that it had all been a vivid nightmare, a faint, raspy whisper filled the room. "Thank you, Amelia." Amelia's heart leaped into her throat as she realized the voice came from the corner of the room. She turned, and there, standing in the dim light, was the apparition of a woman, her eyes still filled with sorrow, though now mixed with something else, something darker. The spirit took a step closer, her translucent form wavering as if struggling to maintain her presence. "You've set us free, but now we need something from you," she hissed, her voice sending shivers down Amelia's spine. Amelia was paralyzed with fear, unable to respond. The spirit's face contorted with anger, and suddenly, a gust of icy wind blew through the room, extinguishing the candles and plunging everything into darkness. In the pitch-black room, Amelia felt a chilling presence closing in on her. She fumbled for her phone, desperately trying to turn on the flashlight, but her trembling hands made it difficult. As the light finally pierced the darkness, she saw that the room was empty, the spirit had vanished. But the sense of dread remained, and Amelia knew the spirit's request was not over. As the rain resumed its gentle patter against the windowpane, Amelia understood that her ordeal was far from over, and the true horror was just beginning. Hope you liked the story. For more horror stories, subscribe to our channel.